So here's a subject that I've talked about on this podcast before, and this is one that actually I never hoped. So here's a subject that I've talked about on this podcast before, and it's honestly one that I had hoped that I would never have to talk about again. But unfortunately, it looks like I pretty much have to because, well, Joshua Fabia is back. So for anybody who might happen to be new here or just doesn't know who Joshua Fabia is, he happens to be the former trainer, former coach, former whatever of the former UFC fighter, former Ultimate Fighter winner, former lightweight contender Diego Sanchez. And he also happens to be the person who is singularly responsible for destroying Diego Sanchez's UFC career, which is kind of which makes a lot of things that Joshua Fabia has to say about his relationship with Diego Sanchez, or what he thinks that his relationship with Diego Sanchez should be, pretty ironic. But I'm going to come to those in a minute. So the reason why we're talking about Joshua Fabia again is because Joshua Fabia recently posted some video on social media, some video that apparently I think that being the narcissistic little twit that he is, he must have just insisted was going to make him look really good and make Diego Sanchez look really bad. But the video basically consisted of Joshua Fabia strong arming $100,000 out of Diego Sanchez in exchange for Diego Sanchez having just the privilege of terminating his professional relationship with Joshua Fabia and his I'm trying to think of what the hell it is that he calls it, the school of self or something of the other. I mean, it's all just basically it's it's professionally fraudulent, quackery, a bunch of nonsense from top to bottom. He really never really brought anything of value to the Diego Sanchez equation, and he subtracted so much out of it. You know, and you know, and he extracted so much that was of value to himself. Apparently that includes most recently $100,000. Now, reportedly, this follows a lot of threats by Joshua Fabia against Diego Sanchez and potentially against his family. And you would have thought that paying him the $100,000 would have at least satisfied enough that he wouldn't go out and actually carry out those threats. But the fact that we have seen this video and that we've seen what Joshua Fabia has been doing really shows exactly the opposite. Is that he took the money and now he's still out exercising at least some of these threats. Now Diego Sanchez, he's going to court and he's trying to get a restraining order to try to contain Mr. Fabia because, well, he just doesn't seem to have the good sense to contain himself. And he doesn't really seem to have the idea that the only thing that's really keeping him going right now is the fact that Diego Sanchez doesn't want to follow him to whatever dark place it is that he seems to be determined to go to. Personally, I think that if these two ever got into what you would call, think of as a fair fight, whether we're talking about like a fair fight in an octagon or in a boxing ring, or even just a fair fight on the street, I don't think that I don't think that Joshua Fabia stands anything even remotely resembling a chance against Diego Sanchez. I mean, we've got pretty good evidence for that. I mean, the fact that Donald Cerrone absolutely beat the shit out of Joshua Fabia, in an Albuquerque bar somewhere because Joshua Fabia was in there running his mouth about his super secret fighting skills that he has. I mean, apparently he was, some mysterious tribe somewhere taught him like the five-finger death punch or the finger poke of doom or some other fictional nonsense. And Donald Cerrone was not having any of it. And by all accounts of everybody who witnessed it, Joshua Fabia and Donald Cerrone, they got into a scuffle, and Fabia got absolutely dog-walked. And there are even some accounts that suggest that Donald Cerrone put Joshua Fabia in the hospital. So if you ever needed anything even resembling a reason, just one more reason to be a fan of Cowboy Donald Cerrone, right there you have it. He put Joshua Fabia in the hospital. I was already a fan. But much, much more so now. So the video is out there. It's out there. Joshua Fabia was somehow stupid enough to think that he doesn't look bad for putting it out there. So that's how it got out there. I'm not going to link to it, but if you want to see it for yourself, there's an account. There's a creator by the name goes by the name of Jesse on Fire that has that video, and some analysis on his account. So I'm not going to go real deep into that, but just the sheer amount of, just delusionability, to paraphrase, to steal a phrase from Kevin Owens, the sheer amount of delusionability that this guy expresses, during the course of his interaction, where he's basically extorting this money out of Diego Sanchez, is absolutely unreal. He sits there and he tries to pretend that Diego Sanchez would be nothing if not for Joshua Fabia. Which, when you're dealing with that particular type of malignant narcissist, is not really that unusual. That's a very on-brand thing for a malignant narcissist to do. But the simple fact of the matter is that Joshua Fabia had absolutely nothing to do with the making of Diego Sanchez. For whatever you could say about Joshua Fabia, whatever it is that he is or has become, if anything, the opposite is the only thing that's actually true. But what is it that Diego Sanchez is actually famous for? Well, he won The Ultimate Fighter. I can't think of offhand which season it was, but he was on the show and he won. That was how he got into the UFC. And Joshua Fabia was nowhere near him at the time that happened. He had absolutely nothing to do with that. He didn't come around until years and years later, when it was pretty obvious that Diego Sanchez was having his struggles. And like any kind of fraudulent guru like that, what's more attractive to a fraudulent guru than anything else in the world? Well, somebody who's struggling. Somebody who they can kind of worm their way into their life, their personal life or their professional life. And by all accounts, it looks like Joshua Fabia did both. And some of the things that he did to Diego Sanchez long before he put out this video and made all of these threats, it's absolutely unreal that this guy would think that he should be able to get away with any of it. He went out and without consent or knowledge of Diego Sanchez, created an OnlyFans account that was basically, well, let's just say that it was aimed at, let's just say, LGBTQ men. That was the target audience. A very, very creepy, grotesque little account that he was running, and he was collecting all the money from it. And he even sat there and said, it's like, well, I'm doing all the work associated with this account, so I guess I should, collect all of the money. Because, of course, that's the way the guys like this think. And so, yeah, he did that, and apparently he figures that he should just get away with that. After that, he hijacked Diego Sanchez's entire career, for the sake of his own self-promotion. The incident that actually wound up getting Diego Sanchez released from the UFC was basically centered around Joshua Fabia going in and hijacking, an interview session, between what was supposed to be an interview session between Diego Sanchez and the commentators for what was at that point supposed to be a scheduled UFC fight between Sanchez and Cerrone. And he went in there and he basically hijacked the whole thing, and he made it all about himself and about how the commentators should respect him, which, by the way, they should not. Absolutely, Michael Bisping should not respect Joshua Fabia. Absolutely not. Absolutely. Daniel Cormier absolutely should not respect Joshua Fabia. Nobody should. He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. He hasn't earned it. And the only reason why he's out walking around thinking like he's big and bad and that he can do all of this stuff and continue to do these things to Diego Sanchez is because Diego Sanchez isn't doing anything about it. Personally, I wish that he would. And I've said previously that he should. I think that at a certain point, maybe somebody ought to schedule a fight between Diego Sanchez and Joshua Fabia. Don't bother doing a contract signing or anything like that. You know what? Just schedule it. Just put it out there and tell him, hey, Joshua Fabia, on X day, there is going to be an octagon. There's going to be a scheduled time. Diego Sanchez is going to be in that octagon. And you can either show up or you cannot show up. You can show up and you can get what you got coming to you, and get what you deserve, or you can run and hide like a little bitch. Which honestly is what I think he's probably going to do, although he was dumb enough to try to fight Donald Cerrone. So, I don't know. Maybe Joshua Fabia would be dumb enough to show up. But I know that I'd like to see it. So, I don't think that Dana White watches a lot of YouTube. I don't think that he has ever seen so much as a second of my humble little YouTube channel. I mean, I think I've got fewer than 300 subscribers. I am not by any means a heavyweight of the YouTube community or a heavyweight of the MMA community on YouTube or anything of the sort, and I don't pretend to be. It would be kind of cool if something like that ever happened, but I'm not counting on it. I'm not pretending to be such a thing. So with that in mind, I don't necessarily think that Dana White is ever going to see this, but on the off chance that you do, Uncle Dana, please, just schedule the fight. Of course, I mean, work it out with Diego. Make sure that Diego's on board with it, and just say, hey, Mr. Fabia, Mr. Tough Guy. You're sitting there. You're on your video talking about how you have to expose Diego Sanchez. Hey, you know what? Let's expose you in the absolute most real terms that a person can ever possibly be exposed. Let's expose you. For what you are at the basest level. You can show up on X Day and fight Diego Sanchez fair and square, like a man, like you're supposed to be able to do. I mean, if you're going to be active as a trainer or a coach, in this sport, you'd better have some ability to do this kind of thing on your own. So you're supposed to be able to do it. Let's see you do it. You say that you want to expose Diego. Hey, here's a great chance to expose Diego if you think that you can. But I don't think that you can. And I don't think that you will. And even if something like that just comes down to something so simple as, it's national TV, maybe it's in the UFC Apex, maybe it's in some city or somewhere, but, it gets to a certain point. Joshua Fabia is supposed to make his entrance to come out and fight Diego Sanchez, who's in the octagon waiting for him, and he doesn't come out. I would say I would consider you to be exposed. I certainly don't think that anything like that is ever going to happen on account of my meager influence on this sport. But not only would I love to see it, I think that it needs to happen. Like, it must be done. It needs to happen. So, Uncle Dana, on the off chance that you're watching this, please, just do it.